Our guest speaker tonight, folks, is Eric Durtschi, and he's the son of the candy maker, Dr. Eric Durtschi of Durtchi, okay, and has an intense passion for all things chocolate from an early age, and started developing dessert recipes with chocolate at the age of 8, believe it or not. So he must have been in his mum's good books forever, I think. You know, he was one of those kids. He decided to pursue a profession in health and wellness, and as a chiropractor, he frequently asked to offer diet and healthy living advice. During his research, he learned that cocoa or cacao was an amazing superfood in its unadulterated state. He began development of the world's first brewed cocoa in 2007. His mission is to simply help people appreciate and rediscover how wonderful chocolate can be. Eric will be giving a brief introduction to chocolate, going over the history and origins of chocolate up through to the current artisan chocolate world. So welcome, Eric, and I'll hand over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Well, let's just say, I think we're going to probably want to plan a follow-up of this at some point, because typically with this class, I like to do chocolate tastings and a lot of hands-on stuff, but it's kind of hard. I haven't developed the technology yet to be able to let you taste some of the chocolate that I make. So we'll have a round 2 at some point in the future.
Okay, well, hopefully when COVID is finished, you know, we can invite you across and maybe, you know, or actually we can do a virtual tasting. You know, we'll buy all of the samples and list them A, B, C, D, or whatever it is, and have people taste and give you that contact backwards and forwards.
Oh, that's actually not a bad idea. Huh. Well, I know we're going to talk about chocolate, and you mentioned in there that from the time I was 8 years old, I started creating dessert recipes. I'm one of 7 children who grew up on a farm in Middle Tennessee. And I loved making desserts, but here we are with the rare fruit growers. So I also want to put a plug in that I started propagating berry plants that same year when I was 8 years old. I found a wild berry. So in Tennessee, almost everything is blackberries. There's very few like wild raspberries or anything, but from my vacations out west, I recognized the difference in raspberry and blackberry canes. And I was hiking on our hill one time and I found a cane that had that frostiness to it, and it was more round and not ribbed like blackberries. And so I told my siblings, I'm like, hey, I found a raspberry bush, and none of them believed me. So I hiked back up there, dug it up, and started growing it. And from there, like, I developed this passion for gardening. My whole life, I focused primarily on edibles. That's all I do. Berries, fruits, stone fruits, things like that. I've grown over 100 varieties of blackberry and raspberries, over 50 varieties of blueberries. I've grown probably 20 different varieties of peaches, many pears. So I am a huge gardening fanatic as well. Yeah, my mom,
we say, sorry to interrupt you, but we say that anything you can't eat is a weed.
That's right. That's right. My mom is a gardener. She's a master gardener, but she does almost all flowering things. So we complement each other quite well. I'm like, no, you have to have this thing growing so that whenever I come and visit you, I can pick some peaches or whatever. But so I really do enjoy gardening. I love all things around gardening and all things with chocolate. So you're going to kind of wonder how this ties in, but I actually work direct with farmers all over the world, cacao farmers all over the world. I've come up with some unique ways of processing the cacao into a better finished product. I actually have isolated some unique strains. I've helped with setting up plantations of one specific variety that is superior to the others that have just been wild harvested around. So gardening is a huge passion of mine, but tonight we're primarily going to talk about chocolate. So I'll move on. Let's see. I have How do I screen share? Do I have the, looks like I have the option to do
Yeah,
that.
there should be a green button down the bottom of the screen.
Oh, there sure is. Okay, I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint thing. Now, anybody feel free to ask questions. Normally I do like this to be more interactive, but it's kind of hard to do that because we only have like, we can't all start talking at the same time, but definitely feel free to ask questions, or at the end of it, we can have some questions that you guys can ask, whatever you like.
Yeah,
But
well,
I do definitely want feedback, and because this is something that, the world is so passionate about chocolate, but so few people understand where it came from, or that it even comes in this crazy looking football like pod. So feel free to ask any questions you want. So me and my wife, Cassandra, we started this together back in about 2007 is when I first came up with the idea to try and find a way of making a healthy chocolate drink. And as I started looking into the history and origins, I saw that for thousands of years, cacao had been used primarily for the many health benefits that it had. It was used by royalty, by the military to give them long-lasting stamina and energy. It was very prized for its health benefits. There was something called the Florentine Codex, which was a manual of medicinal uses related to cacao, the leaves, the bark, the pulp of the cacao pod, and there were over 1,400 medicinal uses listed in there. So science has only recently caught back up with what the ancients understood all along. So we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. Up until 2018, the oldest known archaeological evidence for cacao had been around 1500 BC. But in 2018, there was some new evidence that was found that listed it about 1,500 years earlier. So this came from an area of Ecuador. So all the way back to 3000 BC, they have or they have found that cacao has been something that was cultivated and used by the Native Americans here. So that's pretty cool. That's a long time that's been processed. And that's just what we found. They're constantly unearthing older and newer archaeological finds. So I wouldn't be surprised if this goes back even beyond that. So the Olmecs, this was around 1500 BC. So the word that we have for cacao comes from the Olmec, or a Nahuatl word meaning chocolatl. And chocolatl means bitter water. So if any of you have ever had a raw cacao bean, or just a plain cacao bean, 100% chocolate bar, you'll know that it's quite bitter. It's a pretty strong taste, but especially whenever it's not been roasted or processed. If you try and bite into a raw cacao bean, it's so bitter, it's like an American persimmon that's 2 weeks before it's ripe. It'll just make your mouth pucker up and feel so dry. It's extremely, extremely bitter. So that's where the word comes from. And for some reason, this little symbol down in the bottom, that is a little fish, but for some reason that means cacao. So I don't know how a fish and cacao match, but that symbol means cacao. This is a cool little pictogram that they found. This is a picture of a king who is testing the temperature of his frothed chocolate drink. Now, they didn't have hot chocolate the way that we have it now. There was no sugar added. It wasn't sweet. It was very different. They had chilies, cinnamon, and other spices. They had cornmeal that was added to it, but it was very frothy. They would mix it from container to container until it got this really nice foam on it that they would then drink. And underneath the table, do you see those little things that have brown on top of them? So those are actually depictions of tamales with a traditional, I just lost the word. Mole, a traditional mole sauce. So, and a traditional mole sauce it had the base of it as cacao beans in there. So I just feel bad for this little servant who's bringing it to him. If the temperature isn't right, he's probably going to be in a lot of trouble. So let's hope he did a good job. Another interesting thing about cacao is it was so prized in this culture that it was actually used as a form of currency. And here I've listed a couple of the different things that you could purchase with cacao beans. A rabbit for 30 cacao beans, a turkey egg for 3, a large tomato. But pretty much anything you wanted could be bartered with or traded with cacao. And another interesting thing is people have been tricky pretty much since man came around. Someone's been trying to finagle and work the system to their benefit. So one of the earliest forms of counterfeit money is cacao. People would form these little clay shaped cocoa beans and they would mix it in with their actual cacao so that they increase the weight and they could make more money from it. So pretty silly. I would not want to make a chocolate or try a chocolate bar made out of these little clay cocoa beans. These are some chocolate pots, traditional ones from different eras and different civilizations, different times. The bottom one, the crazy old man, that's my favorite. I wish I had that mug. That's from the Olmec civilization. I don't really know what's going on there, but I love it. Some of the others that are more attractive and pretty, those would probably be the ones my wife would prefer, but no, I'm crazy. So give me that little bottom guy. But it's kind of cool. So they would store it in these different pots. They usually had a top that would come off because it was traditional for them to pour it from one container to the other so that they could get that nice frothy texture that they wanted. Now, how did we go from this drink that the ancients and the Americas used that was specifically reserved for royalty and it was not sweet to a Hershey's bar that has like 8 to 9% actual cacao in it? How do we go from that? Well, when the Spaniards came to the Americas, they saw and they experienced this and they knew that something was special because it was so important in these cultures, but they didn't get it. They didn't understand the taste. They didn't like it because they wanted things that were a little bit sweeter. In fact, there was pirates routinely took the boats. You know, they took over these Spanish galleons that were coming back from the Americas, and oftentimes they were loaded with valuables. Well, there was one reference that some pirates captured a ship and they sunk it because whenever they looked in the hold, they thought that it was just full of sheep dung because that's what they thought the cocoa beans were. So they had no idea what was going on and they just sunk it. But even in the Spanish, they had really no idea what they were doing. They were taking it because they're like, there must be some value to it. But it wasn't until the Europeans, they started adding sugar and vanilla and other things that it really grabbed on in Europe. And long before we had cafes or coffee shops, there were actually hot chocolate shops. This is a real picture of one of the first chocolate houses in London, all the way back from 1657. And here the elite would go and they would talk about politics and all sorts of, important things as they drank their amazing drinking chocolate. So this was like the original Starbucks right there. This is just a picture of me a few years ago while I was down searching for a new type of bean. So I'd heard about this bean from Peru that was white. So normally when you cut open a cacao bean, a cacao pod, when you cut open the beans, they'll be violet, like deep violet purple color. But in this specific area, I was trying to find beans that were white. So when you cut them open, they were just porcelain clear. So when I was down there in Peru, I had a chance to go by Machu Picchu and experience that as well. But in the jungles back behind there, I actually found some really unique, interesting cacao varieties that I'm working with my company right now. Okay, now this is where the biggest shift comes. So here you have a 5,000-year use of unsweetened cacao in liquid form. That's the way it was prepared. And over a very short period of time, we go from that into Hershey's Kisses. So in 1828, Caspar Van Houten patented a process for a cocoa butter press. So in order to make chocolate back then, they had to be able to press out the cocoa butter so that they were left with just the cocoa solids. And then they would use that and mix it with they would actually have to add back a certain amount of cocoa butter to make a solid chocolate bar. But pressing that out is very difficult. You have to have a tremendous amount of pressure to be able to extract the cocoa butter from the cocoa bean. So then in the 1850s, Joseph Fry added more cocoa butter to the cocoa solids, and then he was able to have something that was liquid and smooth and soft and could then be rehardened into a solid chocolate bar. So that was the very first part of that. Up until then, they would add hot water to it, and you had to add enough water that you would start to turn it into something like drinking chocolate. If you only add a small amount of water to melted chocolate, you'll actually seize it up. It'll turn into a brick. So you can't do that. And that was why early on they had to add cocoa butter. In 1875, you'll recognize a couple of these names. Daniel Peter and Henry Nestle added condensed milk to solid chocolate, and they created a milk chocolate bar. So oftentimes people hear about Switzerland and the chocolate from Switzerland. Well, the truth is there wasn't really anything special about the chocolate in Switzerland. The reason why it was known to be superior was the quality of the milk that they had in Switzerland. Their milk was of superior quality. So milk chocolates that came out of there were just better than others. They had some of the finest dairy products in the world at that time. And the reason why it had to be condensed milk, again, it's because the moisture content was low enough that it didn't ruin and cause the chocolate to seize. So they were able to continue working with it in liquid form so that they could pour it out into chocolate bars. Now, here's a name, John, that you had mentioned. In 1879, this guy, Rudolf Lendt, invented the conch. And this is a machine that's actually important for really dialing in the finished flavor. It makes it a lot more smooth and less of the harsh flavors are in there whenever you conch it. It's able to release a lot of those volatile acids that you have in there. So now look at this, 1828, cocoa butter was presented or invented. And in the 1850s, they had solid chocolate. Now, just about 50 years later, already, the Hershey's factory was making 33 million Hershey's Kisses per day. Isn't that amazing? I think that's amazing. The revolutionary age just really changed things. And here for a 5,000-year history of a liquid drink was, in the course of 50 years, turned into something that the entire world could enjoy, shipped as a solid chocolate bar. It was passed around in the war, in World War I and World War II. This was part of the rations, I heard, because of the health benefits that it had. It had sugar and the cacao. It was known to give you long-lasting energy. So it has a very important world history. Now, where does cacao grow? Well, I'm trying to grow some up here, but it's not ideal. Ideally, you're around 20 degrees north or south of the equator in warm tropical climates. So most of it is in Central and South America. Costa Rica, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil. These are our prime areas for cacao, and that is where we get a bunch of ours from. Now, that being said, about 85% of the world's cacao comes from not the area where it originated, but it comes from West Africa. In West Africa, they grow the majority of the bulk quality cacao, so stuff that Hershey's is using and Lindt, things that are not really high quality chocolate, but they're being mixed with lots of other ingredients, lots of other dairy products and sugar, so that you just end up with a nice flat chocolate flavor. So it originated in Central America, but the majority is produced in West Africa. Here's a couple of cool pictures of, I'm going to show you some pretty images of the tree. Now these top three images, those are actually from some of the seeds that I started not that long ago. You plant the fresh bean, and then it just starts to pop up, and then it splits open and it grows right out of the middle of it. It's a really pretty little tree. I've got several of these growing right now, and I routinely order and bring in cacao pods to do tastings like we're doing right now. And usually I'll grow out the seeds and give them away to people. I don't have any right now, but I'll be ordering another batch before too long, and I'll get a bunch started. And anyone who's interested, just let me know. We'll help you guys get some. They have a really pretty flower. Now on the tree, there will be just thousands of these flowers. And you may have, 10, 15,000, excuse me, about 150,000 of these flowers that will form on a tree. And of that, you'll only get about 100 to 150 ripe cacao pods. Now, there's a little Easter egg in here to let you know the size of these things. See that image on the right? What do you see in there on the top? You see the ant? Probably didn't even notice that was an ant. There's a little ant up there. So these flowers are small. They're not very big, but they are very pretty whenever you're able to get a close-up image of them. Now they grow in these clusters all over, and usually only one or two from each cluster will form. But sometimes, like you see in the top left here, sometimes a whole batch from that cluster will form and create these really unique patterns. So when you think about most fruit trees, peaches, pears, apples, plums, whatever it is, the fruit grows out in the canopy. But with cacao, it grows in the canopy, but it also grows just right out of the trunks. You'll have some of them that are literally just touching the ground. They're right there on the bottom. They're a very unique, very interesting looking tree. It's a lot of fun to go out there and find them. And they'll be all different colors. Like you can see here, there's red, there's yellow, green, and blue, purple, brown. They're really pretty. And most of the places that I visited, it's your family just inherited 5 acres that was in your family of wild jungle, of cacao that's been crossbred and cross-pollinated for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So you don't have one specific variety that you're growing most of the time. This is part of the work that I've done with the farmers to try and help them increase the quality of what they're able to produce. Like this, the top right image there, that comes from one guy's farm. And each of those colors of pods is going to taste different. A chocolate made from all the green pods, all the yellow pods, all the red pods, it will taste different. So it used to be that you would try and find a region or a country, like Venezuelan beans are good. And then it became a country within, a region within Venezuela had superior beans. Well, I've tried to take it beyond that to single estate, and not only single estate, but within your farm, which of the beans or the varieties are you growing? Which one is truly special? Which is one that will put your farm on the map? So that's one of the things I've been working with. I've actually developed several cacaos that have gone on to win international awards for the quality of their chocolate. I import beans for many of the top artisan bean to bar chocolate makers, as well as make some of them myself. And when you crack these pods open, they're full of this white, sticky kind of pulp stuff. They call it mucilage, but that's a gross word, so I just call it pulp. It tastes really good. This is a picture of my wife down there when we were in Nicaragua. So it tastes kind of like cherry limeade. So what you would do is you would put those in your mouth and you would just suck it off, and then you would spit the bean out. You don't want to eat the raw bean, but that pulp is very, very good. In Ecuador and Brazil, they actually have a practice in some areas of putting them in a centrifuge and siphoning off a lot of that juice, and then they'll freeze it and then they'll serve it kind of like a lemonade. It's delicious. Now, if you're familiar with coffee, one of the big words in coffee is it shade grown? Well, a lot of people, you guys probably understand because you're gardeners. A lot of times I do these classes to people who aren't gardeners and they may not understand it. But shade grown is more important because the cacao that grows up in the canopy, it's fine. It's not bad, but it's going to ripen faster because it gets more heat. The ones that are down in the canopy ripen slower, so they're able to develop more complex flavor and better taste than the ones that are up in the top. The typical life cycle is around 6 months from the time that flower forms until a cacao pod is ripe. And so when you're starting a new plantation, you oftentimes will interplant with banana, because the banana will shade the small tree, and it also provides an immediate crop each year that they can have while they're waiting for their cacao trees to grow. In the world, there are three primary classifications of cacao beans. The Criollo on the left, that's the equivalent of heirloom cacao. These are the original native ones that we're growing. They're typically known as the finest, most complex, highest quality, but these trees, they're shorter lived, they're more prone to disease, and they're lower in productivity than some of these newer ones that have come out. Forastero, this is a variety and a type that was found that produces up to 5 times more than a Criollo variety, but the flavor is very lacking. It's a very one-dimensional flavor from a Forastero variety. About 85% of the world's cacao is Forastero. Trinitario is a happy medium. So this is the more of a fine flavor bean that most artisan chocolate makers will be using. It's about 15 to 18% of the world's cacao production is Trinitario. These trees are more productive than Criollo, and they have more flavor than the Forastero. Now, Criollo, those are hard to come by, true Criollo beans. They're very hard. There's only about 2% of the world's cacao that is true Criollo. Okay. Here you've got 3 cacao pods. The top one is rotten. Just leave that one alone. Now on the bottom, you've got 2. Which one is ripe? So let's say you have a farm and you've got lots of different ones. You need to know your trees. You have to have an intimate relationship with them to see which one's ripe. Because what if there's a green one, a yellow one, a red one? So normally most people miss this because they say the one on the right is more ripe because it has a darker, deeper red color. Well, in this case, they'd be wrong, because underneath the skin, the flesh turns a mango color and it lightens up the outside. So if it's a dark green, it becomes a light green. This dark red type becomes, like you can see, a orangish light red. So that's one of the ways that you'll know what's ripe, is you actually will go through, if you're new, and you'll make a little tiny nick in the skin. And if you see a mango color underneath there, that'll let you know it's ripe. That way you can grow lots of different varieties, and you can pretty much have fairly unskilled new workers, if they happen to be in there, they can easily be taught how to determine whether a variety is ripe or not. After they have been harvested, hopefully at the proper time, the first step after that is the fermentation step. So this is a pretty critical step if you want to have really high quality chocolate. If you don't do this right, and if you under ferment it, then you're going to have something that has a very medicinal cherry type taste. It's pretty acidic. It's fairly off-putting. I can tell immediately whenever I try a chocolate that was made from under fermented beans. It's not great. It's pungent, it's astringent, it's not ideal. But if you over ferment it, then you end up killing that flavor, and now you're not left with something that has a lot. It kind of can taste moldy. If the heat gets too high in the middle of this mix, then there's actually something called cryptosporidium that spore will actually break open if the temperature gets over 140, and it will completely ruin that batch. So chocolate that was made from that, it will end up tasting horrible. I won't even mention what it tastes like, but look it up sometime. It's bad. So fermenting it normally takes 4 to 7 days. After that, they've been properly fermented. Oh wait, the fermentation, what that does is it actually breaks down this sweet pulp process, pulp on the outside, breaks down the cacao bean. It makes it less acidic, and it also increases the flavor that's in there. It makes it a much more palatable, less bitter product whenever it's been fermented properly. Then they're dried. The drying is another 4 to 10 day process, depending on where you're at. They usually lay it out on the ground on these patios, or if you're in a more remote area, you'll just stick them on banana leaves on the side of the road, and you'll move them around every once in a while and hope to dry them up. But in a controlled environment, they'll usually be on these nice little covered patios. So roasting this is the part where it really starts to seem like you're actually making chocolate. So if you were in an airplane and you crashed in the middle of the jungle, one of the ways that you might find something that you could eat is by watching what the animals eat. So historically, and right now, the monkeys, chipmunks, whatever it is, they will crack into these pods and they will pull off that pulp and they'll spit the seed out. That's probably what man did initially, because they wouldn't have liked the way that the bean tasted inside. But I like to imagine that they were sitting around a fire telling stories about whatever snake didn't grab them that day in the jungle, and all of a sudden they were spitting their seeds out in the fire, and then they just noticed this amazing smell. And somebody was like, oh, wait, we got to do something else with that. So I like to think that that's where it began, because once they've been roasted, that's when it smells like chocolate. Up until then, fermented beans, fermented and dried beans, they kind of smell like stinky feet. It's not great. So I really have a hard time figuring out how they came across the next step and thought that that would be something that would be good to eat, unless it was that where they're sitting around a fire and it just casually they smelled one, because unroasted beans don't smell good. Winnowing is the process in chocolate making where you crack that shell and you remove that shell that has been exposed to the air and it's more hard and fibrous, and then you just take the inside, which is called cocoa nibs. And you'll grind these cocoa nibs with a combination of heat and friction, and they'll start to melt. The cocoa butter starts to get released and it becomes this liquid called cocoa liquor. So this is actually a machine that I make my chocolate on with a friend, and each of those granite wheels is 1,100 pounds, and they're sitting on top of and rolling around a huge granite slab that also spins around in a circle underneath them. And after a few minutes, it starts to look like this. These solid, dry things start to turn into something that just looks amazing, and it's mesmerizing. The smell is spectacular. Like, I'll sit there, because it's usually warm in there, and it smells so good. And the sound of this granite rolling on top of the granite is just mesmerizing. You'll just sit there and drone out, and 5 minutes will pass and you didn't even realize that you had been there. And me and my friend are just sitting there staring at it. So it's a really cool experience. Making chocolate is a lot of fun. Here's a sad part that you don't get to experience: chocolate tasting. Normally, I get to have you try some stuff, but it's all right. We'll save that for next time. Here's just a couple of great little quotes that talk about, one of my favorite ones is the bottom one, the Cortez Army. Somebody from that army said, "This drink is the healthiest thing and the greatest sustenance of anything you could drink in the world, because he who drinks a cup of this liquid, no matter how far he walks, can go a whole day without eating anything else." So I've experienced that. There are days when I'm doing a lot of my testing on the product, and it's like I'll go all day long without eating hardly anything, and I feel great because there's a lot of great health benefits in there. There's a stimulant called theobromine that gives you long-lasting, more natural energy than caffeine. Here's a list of other things. Magnesium, which so many people are deficient in. Cacao is one of the best sources of magnesium. It's really high in iron. John, you mentioned the health benefits, or excuse me, the mood enhancing things, how it can make people happy. Well, there are actually 5 compounds that are in cacao that do help to boost and elevate your mood. Anandamide is one. That's known as the bliss chemical. So when you're feeling like very, very blissful, then anandamide there's more anandamide in your brain. Theobromine, which is another stimulant, is also a mood enhancer. Phenylethylamine is the love drug. So when we fall in love, phenylethylamine is released. Then there's serotonin, and there's so many things in there that there's reasons why we crave it. Why do we want chocolate? Well, it makes us feel good. And why wouldn't we want something that makes us happy? And it tastes great. And it's healthy. Well, if you have the right chocolate, it's healthy anyway. One of the biggest concerns and the reasons why I started my company Crio Bru was there is a lot of fat in cacao. Now, about 1/3 of that is good oleic acid, 1/3 is neutral, the stearic acid, and then 1/3 is negative, like palmitic acid. But so it's not as bad as it seems. But by brewing it, you are actually able to get the majority of the antioxidants and theobromine, which are the two primary compounds that cause health benefits, but without the fat and calories. So that's where Crio Bru got started. Here's another cool pictogram I like to show. So in the Popol Vuh, which is one of the religious documents down there, they believe that Quetzalcoatl, represented by the bird here, actually was a god who came and gave man the cacao tree, and he was kicked out of heaven because he gave man the cacao tree. And this is a picture of a cacao tree, the tree of life for them, and you can see the cool cacao pods growing all over it. So that is basically the quick and short version of the presentation. Now I'm definitely open for any questions, anything that anybody would like to know. Let's hash it out and see what you've got. I'll get out of here. There we go.
John, you're muted.
John,
Yeah,
you
sorry.
were,
Okay.
oh, there you go.
All right. Yeah, you said during the presentation, Eric, that the part of the process was fermentation. I think of fermentation as a step in alcoholic beverages. So did they ever do anything with the bean to make an alcohol?
Absolutely. And that was one of the primary uses of it as well. They would take this cacao pulp and they would make an alcohol out of that. And some cultures still make this drink from that. In fact, there's a company that I used to sell cocoa nibs and things to that was also making a fermented like beer out of the cacao. But yeah, that is definitely one of the primary uses of it.
Okay, interesting. Rick, you were saying something here about we have a video on cacao growing in northern San Diego County. So, obviously it's well established over here, I think, or it's being established. I don't know.
Is it growing unprotected?
I don't know. That'd be for Rick to chime in on. I don't know whether he's here. Sometimes he has computer difficulties, so I don't know. Frank, you were saying that you have cacao nibs that you bought at a local store.
Oh yeah, Navitas. Yeah, they're a good company. I actually know the owner of that company. We started working in cacao around the same time. Most of his stuff comes from either Peru or Ecuador. They're pretty good products.
Well, I didn't buy it in Ecuador. I bought it at Grocery Outlet.
No. The owner of Navitas, that's where they tend to source theirs from.
I know, I'm playing.
Oh, okay. Like, sorry.
Okay, Charlie, you've got a question. Okay, Charlie's got a friend, Bill Fennier, who works for a company that imports cacao from Africa. So, yeah, it looks like people have connections. Elizabeth, you have, you wanted to know where you can get the nibs. And I think, maybe Eric can share, is it the sort of thing that you can buy somewhere easily or?
Yeah, cacao nibs are at most health stores. Sprouts will have them. Whole Foods will have them. They're fairly easy to come by right now.
I meant, but you mentioned different types, and so
Oh yeah.
that's what's important to me is where can I get them where the type is labeled, and then also to parallel that, when you mentioned all this nutritional information, I thought, oh, what's the best way to prepare it to preserve that? Sorry, that's two
So
questions.
yeah, right now it's actually kind of difficult because the market is still relatively new. I don't know of very many companies, or actually I don't know any companies that sell lots of different varieties of cacao nibs. Um, I think eventually the market will probably be there. My company is one that probably does something similar. We have multiple origins, but ours is roasted and it's finely ground, intended to be brewed. But we do have, you know, Ghana, Ecuador, Venezuela. We have lots of different varieties, but I'm not sure as far as locally available cacao nibs. I'm not certain that that's something that is very easy to find. As for the health benefits, a lot of people will take these nibs and they'll mix them in with their smoothies. You can mix them on top of salads. You could, I mean, even if you're having a chocolate bar that was made from an artisan chocolate maker, most of those have been very minimally processed compared to a Hershey's bar or a Lindt bar. And all of my testing that has been done has actually been done on some of the darkest roasted cacao, and it's been brewed before I've tested it, and it still had brewed with boiling water, and it still had off the chart levels of antioxidants and theobromine. So pretty much any way you go with a cacao, a non super commercial like Hershey's or something like that, if it's an artisan quality like Navitas that Frank showed, then they're going to be full of the health benefits. Like there will be so many in there, you won't need to worry about that.
That's fabulous. Do you think it's going to become the new coffee?
We're growing fairly quickly. You know, a lot of our consumers, they actually mix it with their coffee. Some people end up liking it more than coffee, but a big part of coffee is the caffeine, and cacao does not have that level of stimulant, so it's kind of hard. People really want that kick sometimes, but our company is definitely growing, and most of our users are also coffee drinkers. So I think we're the only coffee alternative that is actually well received in the coffee community. Most of the others are for people who can't drink coffee for whatever reason. So yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I hope it keeps growing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Eric, somebody was saying, where can they buy the pulp or the juice from the pulp that you were talking about earlier? Is that available out here?
There have been a couple of companies that have attempted it. It degrades very quickly, so it has to be processed within minutes of them opening up the cacao pod. So it's not something that's very available. I have been working with a company to cold process the pulp, and bring it up. So that is something that in the next couple of years, I would imagine it will be more readily available. But as of right now, the two companies that I know that were making this and trying to import it, they have both gone out of business just because the supply chain is very difficult. You would need to be a pretty large business to be able to simplify the means of bringing this and making it available, because you don't have wide scale distribution, and people don't want to pay an extra $1 per bottle usually to have something shipped to them cold, refrigerated. It's kind of tricky.
Yeah, what about as a concentrate? You know, you freeze dry it and then concentrate it as a powder and then reconstitute it again later.
Yeah, that is that's what I'm working on right now. I have a partner who has a plant in Ecuador, and we're trying to freeze dry it. So I've had quite a few successful runs, so that might be something that is more easily available. I'm actually working on a line of energy drinks as well that will be sweetened with cacao. If you cold brew certain beans from certain regions, you actually have a very fruity type taste instead of chocolatey. And so then sweetening it with this cacao pulp, I think that would be a very unique market. So that's something I'm working on as well. I love chocolate. I love cacao, and I love being creative and trying to find out what can I do that nobody else has done before. So far I keep coming up with new ideas, and as long as I do, I guess I've got a job, right?
Yeah, yeah. Kathy here is asking, what is your favorite variety? I don't know whether it's a chocolate or of cacao or what, but do you have
Yeah,
a
so
favorite?
for both chocolate and cacao, they actually both come from Venezuela, different regions in Venezuela, but Venezuela is just, there is some spectacular cacao varieties in Venezuela. It's been there for a long time. They've been doing it right. Oh, that's one of the things I didn't mention in my little class. So there's a region in Venezuela called Chuao that's only accessible by boat. It's a small little perfect microclimate where they've been growing and harvesting and processing cacao as a community for over 400 years. Now, the chocolate coming out of there is very complex. It's mild, it's nutty, it has all sorts of subtle, smooth flavors. Now, they've taken about 150 years ago, they took cacao stock from there and they transplanted and started growing it in Madagascar. And because of the difference in climate, the terroir, so what's grown next to it, the soil, the climate, everything, that same bean that was very subtle and smooth and complex now became, from Madagascar, it's this intensely citrus thing. It's like raspberries and lime just exploding in your mouth from the very same variety of tree. So where it's grown makes a huge difference in the quality of it. But Venezuela, for me, I love it. You can go 50 kilometers away to a new valley and you'll have a totally different flavor profile. So I love Venezuelan cacao.
Yeah, but you wouldn't want to live there now. It's
No,
not very
no,
places.
no,
Yeah,
I would
a friend of
not.
mine's from Venezuela, and he just got out of there with his family. He's up in Virginia at the moment. So, but he's an American citizen, but
Yeah.
he chose to live down there and work the oil fields and stuff like that. But yeah, we've got other things down here. Somebody's asking about a field trip, you know. Elizabeth, you want to talk about a field trip? Anyway, Elizabeth was saying, you know, there's a field trip question mark. Where can we go to see what you're doing? Or where
Well,
are you anyway? Where are you located?
Yeah, we want to come visit, or we want to go someplace that will let us come visit.
I'm in Galita. You know, in Galita, we don't have much. I've got a few small cacao trees growing, but nothing that you can really tour. If you want to tour, then I've got hundreds of fig trees, so you can see those. But yeah, you know,
Okay.
get enough people and let's make it happen. I certainly have the resources. I'm going down to Costa Rica in the end of May, and part of that I'll be touring a couple of different cacao places down there that have been wanting to work with us. So that'll be fun. But I'm always open for it.
So you don't grow it here
No.
because it doesn't grow well. You just process it here.
Yeah. In fact, I'm constantly trying to find what varieties will grow here and be cold tolerant. I've killed so many because I leave them out and like, well, let's see if it's going to work. And then it drops below 40 degrees for an hour and they're dead. They do not like the cold weather at all. Maybe when they're older and more established, maybe they could tolerate it, but certainly not as young ones. They do not like below 50.
Well, San Diego should be a reasonable place to grow them, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I mean, San Diego is definitely, you guys are warmer than we are here. We get probably once or twice a year, we do have temperatures that will come close to freezing, and the trees outside just can't handle that.
Right. You're talking about your trip coming up in May. Do you want a film crew to go down there with you and videotape anything?
If there's a film crew that wants to go down and they're taking care of their own expenses, then come on down. I'll take care of getting you access to the right places. Okay,
well, because we're planning a trip to Florida in the end of June, July to do mangoes. So,
cool.
You know, why not go down, you know, south of the border? Do we need a visa or anything to get in down there?
Just a passport. You don't need a visa.
Okay, all right, that's simple enough.
Have you heard of a brand of chocolate that they sell for the antioxidants called Xocai? Xocai?
I have,
Have you tried them?
I have.
Do you like them?
It's been a while. It's pretty good. They mix acai with their cacao, and I think they could have done better, but their focus wasn't really the quality of the chocolate. It was more the health benefits of it. And I've specifically focused, I have a very unique skill set in that I've probably tried more varieties of cacao than there's very few people who've done what I've done. I'm one of probably a handful of people in the world who can taste a raw cacao bean to determine whether or not it's going to make a good chocolate. So that's kind of my specialty. I tried many years ago getting Shosai to actually partner with me and work with me, like, let me help you make even better chocolate so that you have a product that could do even better. Because, but maybe I'm just a snob. I really like my chocolate. So if I was going to eat it, I would want the chocolate to be a little bit better quality. But as far as like for the masses, they're probably just fine with the quality of Shosai's chocolate.
Yeah,
Okay,
I have some. Thank you.
We've got some questions coming in from people that are interested. If Southern California is warm enough to grow cacao, where can we get plants?
There are some nurseries in Florida that will sell them.
Okay.
Outside of that, I bring in cacao pods. Like when I come back from Costa Rica, I'll probably have 10, 15 cacao pods with me, and each of those will have 30 to 50 seeds, and I'll plant them, and the majority of them will root. So if you guys want to hit me up at the end of the summer, I'll probably have, I mean, if you guys let me know who's interested, I'll get you some started. If you don't mind a little seedling or something like that. But other than that, if you want some little ones that are already started, I've found them on eBay from some places in Florida. And sometimes you get them from Hawaii, but the ones from Florida are just fine and they're cheaper.
Okay, and do they grow true to variety or?
No, those won't. Those are seeds. So you won't know what you're growing. You'd have to graft it if you wanted to know what it was.
Question. Yeah, grafting. So, you know, most cacaos are grafted with a known variety, and you go from there. Okay, well, that's good to know. And I think, there's quite a lot of people showing interest in seeds and seedlings. So that's good. And in fact, you're talking about Florida. While we're over there looking at mangoes and tasting mangoes, we might be also looking for cacao pods as well and see if we can't get seeds.
Yeah.
So that's great. Let's see, does anybody else have more questions? Because I'm just fascinated with all of the benefits that you get from chocolate. And I know, right at the beginning, you said that the Swiss chocolate was superior because of the milk. And I imagine that the milk is superior because it has a high butterfat content.
Yeah, for sure.
And, and of course, if they were adding condensed milk to then that's got to be over the top because, I remember going to Vietnamese coffee shops and having Vietnamese coffee, which is condensed milk and coffee. And man, that's out of this world. But I do remember fond memories of traveling through Switzerland and going to the Nestle factory. And I believe they took over two other chocolate companies in its evolution or growth period that were very, very famous for specialty chocolates. But it was interesting. We ate a lot of chocolate and we brought home a suitcase full of chocolate from Switzerland.
I bet.
Yeah.
So I actually, a lot of the farmers in Tennessee were dairy farmers, and there's different types of cattle, but we had brown Swiss. And if you had a brown Swiss, it was very different. Your milk was not necessarily for drinking. It was for making yogurts and other stuff because it was so much more intense and so much richer than the regular milk.
And cheeses and stuff like that. Yeah. We used to use Jerseys and Guernseys for that because they had a bigger butterfat, but then you'd always mix in Friesians because the Friesians were the bulk producers.
Yeah.
The butterfat wasn't high, but the volume was huge.
Yeah.
So, you know, it brings back lots of memories, but interesting stuff. Okay, does anybody else have any questions off the top? Oh, okay, there's one here. How long
I have
to
a
grow?
question.
Okay, Martha, go for it.
How easy are they to graft? Have you ever grafted them?
Yeah, I've grafted them. They're very easy to graft, but what isn't easy is getting fresh scion. It goes bad
Yeah.
quickly. So it's the kind of thing that really needs to be done there. So by the time you cut it, I don't even know, unless you had like maybe FedEx Express, I'm not sure that the scion would be fresh enough for that. I do have plans once my cacao trees are big enough. I do have plans because I have some varieties that I really want to grow, but I'm not going to waste my time going through all this effort if I can't get them to grow here. And I don't want to baby them constantly all year. I mean, yeah, I'll put them in 25-gallon pots and I'll bring them in and out during the winter, sure. But so far,
So are you keeping yours in like a greenhouse or a hothouse of some sort?
I did in the winter until the temperatures are no longer below 40. And as long as they're not going to be below 40, then I have them outside and they're growing well. But during the winter, when I just don't know what it's going to be like, I brought them inside and just kept them there so they would be warm. But yeah, it's really below 40. That's the critical thing. If it gets below 40 for an extended period of time, they're just gone. They'll start to get brown. And the minute you start to see them turn brown, you just throw it out because it's already done. And if you cut the trunk on it, you'll see that it's already turned to brown mush. It's just dead. Even though it doesn't look dead yet, it's on its way out.
Okay.
I know one of our members, I don't think he's online tonight, Denny Luby, had one that he had grown for several years, and he kept it in a very protected little like a shed that he has.
Yeah.
I don't think he still has it. He's in Huntington Beach.
Yeah, so yeah, so they're not easy to grow. You know, you've got to have the right climate, and it seems like you know, soil conditions. I don't know. You said before that you know, you take them from one region to another, and a different soil type has a different effect on the final product. But you know, what sort of soil do they like? Do they like an acidic soil or neutral soil or junk or what? You know?
They do kind of like azaleas, rhododendrons, blueberries. They do kind of like a lower pH soil, so slightly acidic.
Okay.
Mine are growing fine though. Mine are growing fine without that, and fairly neutral. But you don't want alkaline soil. I don't believe.
Right. And what about drainage? You know, they're not like wet feet or anything like that. Are they typically grown on the side of hills where drainage is good, or?
Yeah, I mean these are jungle areas, so the floor can stay pretty wet down there. So I don't think they're
Moisture
too prone to drowning. You know, I think they're probably okay. Some of these areas that I visit, it's like rain nonstop. So I think they're
right. Yeah, well, you were saying that you interplant with, or they interplant with bananas, and usually bananas are grown on slope because they need lots of water but good drainage. So
yeah.
you know, I'm thinking that maybe it's the same sort of compatibility. But anyway, how deep a shade do they tolerate? Well, obviously they're an undergrowth tree, so you know, they could probably tolerate a fair amount of shade.
Yeah, they can tolerate a fair amount of shade and they'll produce quite well. But the best ones are where you actually have a dense canopy that is now formed by mature cacao trees. So where once they're mature, they provide their own shade, but then those leaves are absorbing enough sun and they're putting all of that down into the cacao that's grown underneath. But you do want where the cacao itself is growing underneath there, it needs to be nice and shaded. And they really don't tolerate a lot of heat. Unless you have a very humid climate and you put those out in the sun, they'll dry up and they'll turn crispy. So you have to have a fairly mature tree before it can handle full sun. They like a lot of shade.
It sounds like you're saying that Florida is probably a better climate than California because, you know, here it's just too dry.
Yep.
So
I have to spray mine fairly regularly. On those days where it's hot and moist, I have a mister that's just going, because otherwise the leaves get crisp and you can tell they're drying out fast.
Right. Okay. Well, you know, I found it a really fascinating discussion, Eric. Really, it was absolutely wonderful. And I think everybody else, you know, is the same. And, you know, you've given us the website, how to contact you. And if we've got people asking whether they can buy seeds from you. So I'm sure that through the website, people can contact you and negotiate and do whatever they need to do. So
yeah, I mean, I don't charge for anything for the seeds. You know, if I bring some up and I know people want some, then whatever our cost is for shipping, because you do have to express ship them up. So that's usually the biggest expense. I'm happy to share them, and let's, you know, if we find a time where we're all together, I'll just, it's whatever it costs us is what it is. I don't upcharge for anything like that.
Right.
It's
Well,
just
I know Ty was organizing some sample packs of your products, and we've got a photo contest that actually finishes tomorrow. And next Thursday, the board will judge the entries, and people will get sample packs that Ty's arranged and for the best entries. So we will have some people taste, and we hope that you know, people can buy the product and sample for themselves. So where can we get your product? Is it direct from you, or is it in retail outlets?
We're primarily based online. Again, it's a product that most people don't even know exists at this point. So we are on our website. We sell 95% of our product. We're in a few stores, but CrioBru.com is that's where we do almost everything.
All right. Well, that's good news. So hopefully you'll see a rash of orders come through from our little group here to give it all a try. But thanks again. I really appreciate the contribution, and I learned a lot. And I revisited a lot of places in Switzerland, brought back some nice memories. We ate a lot more than we drank chocolate, that's for sure. But I did taste one recently out of Malaysia that was made by Cadbury's, and it was durian flavored chocolate.
Wow, really?
Oh yeah, and it was really incredible. You know, I had to put it in the freezer after I opened the packet because it stunk the house out. So it was good stuff. It was good. But anyway, Eric, thank you very much for a wonderful evening and a very enlightening presentation. And
my pleasure. Anytime. Hopefully we can do this in person at some point in the future. Thanks a lot.
I look forward to it. All right, my friends, and everybody, don't forget next Saturday and Sunday we have the plant sale. The 24th and 25th is the plant sale. I've sent emails out to those people that are plant sitting and drop-off points. So I'll be traveling with Ty and with Tony to come around and pick up those plants Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, and make that delivery to the Christmas tree lot. So we hope we've got quite a big inventory. I was surprised to see what we have. And there's a lot of good stuff coming from Norm's place. Thank you very much, Martha, for the Propagation Committee's contributions. And thank you to everybody that has made contributions with plants. It helps us to keep the tradition alive. We miss green scene. And you know, the efforts last year with Frank and Laura were fantastic. But we need to keep moving forward and make sure that that pot of money that we have available for scholarships continues. So thanks again for everybody that's contributed. Thank you for everybody that's volunteered. And we look forward to seeing you next weekend. And hopefully you've got your credit cards. Hopefully you've got a checkbook, and hopefully you've got plenty of cash to buy up big. Anyway, until then, stay safe, everybody. And we'll announce the awards for the chocolate packs probably via email after next Thursday's board meeting, where we've selected the winners. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Did
Bye-bye.
everybody see Don's email talking about if you're a member of something like Nextdoor to advertise the plant sale?
I did. I've done my advertising on 2 social media sites, or 3 actually, that I have, and one is the Foothill Ranch community, Lake Forest community, and then on the OC Fruit Growers. So if everybody, thanks Charlie, if everybody could get out there and get onto their local community site and advertise the hell out of this, then we'll sell everything, and there won't be anything left over for Laura Kemp to worry about. So hopefully we have a big attendance. But remember, we have to follow the guidelines of wearing masks and being socially distanced. So we might get to a point where we have to limit the number of people that actually are in the enclosure and looking at and buying trees. So those that are volunteers will have to make sure that we monitor that fairly closely and don't upset the apple cart. But anyway, folks, look forward to seeing you next week. And Tree, thank you very much for your contribution. I think I'm going to come down to your place on Wednesday evening. And but I'll text everybody beforehand, let them know our expected arrival times, and then Ty, myself, and Tony will be those that are picking up and putting plants into the truck and then delivering to the Christmas tree site. All righty, that's about it. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we sign off? I see no hands, so I think we're in good shape. Take care, everybody. We'll see you Thursday or next weekend. All the best.